Carston. He is a dental anesthesiologist. He's an assistant professor at Oregon Health Sciences University, vice chair of the Washington State Dental Commission for the State Department of Health, chair of infection control. Hint, hint, that's important. Dave's given more than 30 talks on COVID-19 going back to January of 2020. The Carstons have been part of the parish for over a quarter century. And in his notes to me to introduce him, he says that he enjoys making ice cream and gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free recipes. His wife is Sharon, his son is Davin, and their family dog is Kiki the Chigi. We also have Katie Arkush. She is principal at Sarah J. Anderson Middle School in the Vancouver District. Recently, over the past year, became officially a member of Our Lady of Lourdes, but has been hanging with us for several years now. Over the last week or two, I've gotten a couple of questions from parishioners about why did I get a public school principal to do this for us when we have our own school and our own principal? And I do have a very good reason. Our own parish school has been working overtime from the get-go, putting out tons of information about COVID strategies and what our school is doing and how we're coping and processing and managing everything. They've been putting all of that out to the school parents on an ongoing basis for months and months. But we haven't heard anything from the Vancouver district or from anyone in the public system. And that's the information gap that I was trying to plug at this meeting. Besides, I met Katie when she became officially a part of the parish, and I think she's fun. So I thought it'd be great to have her on this. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Carston for a state of the question medically.
Thank you very much, Woody. Hey, Matt, can you put up the slides?
Of course. And just a technology note, if you could stay muted for those who aren't presenting during the presentations, just so people can hear, people aren't fighting over who's saying what audio-wise. And if you have any questions you think of, you can shoot me a message. So that way I can collect them. Matt is my name if you don't know me. You shoot me a message, and that way I will pass it on when we have our Q&A period.
Thank you, Matt. So just to recap a little bit, I do a bunch of different stuff. I have no conflicts of interest regarding COVID-19 or vaccines. And as Woody said, I do not represent the Washington State Department of Health or Oregon Health Sciences University in this very short presentation. Next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so I'm sure you're familiar that the vaccines have been coming out. I've been tracking this since January 10th of 2020, what's going on, and understand that the vaccines, they were Pfizer and Moderna, they had prospective vaccines within days of that genome being published of COVID, of the SARS-CoV-2, and they'd been working on getting them available. So that does not mean that they started from ground zero. Much of this technology started back in the 1980s with HIV, and it continued with SARS-CoV-1 and MERS viruses. The mRNA type of vaccines the technologies became available about 4 or 5 years ago, and everything was just ready to go for an urgency. The advantage of mRNA is that it can be made available very quickly. So some people have been concerned, wow, this seems really fast. How could these things be available this quickly without having gone through all this testing that we normally do? Understand that the testing protocols, typically a vaccine takes about 7 years to become available, were established in the 1950s. And we really haven't had the urgency to change those protocols until very recently. So these things are very available. Now, there have been about 30-some million vaccinations done where people have been vaccinated for both. They've been vaccinated number 1 and number 2 on either the Pfizer or Moderna. which means that this is the largest phase 4 trial ever. More people have been tested on these things than ever before, and we've had very few side effects. So it's been very good. The effectiveness of both the Pfizer and Moderna are in excess of 95%, meaning that 95% of people will show no symptoms, and 5% of people will show some symptoms, and the likelihood is that no one will end up in the hospital very sick. Does that mean that there's zero transmission? It doesn't mean that. So that's one of the things that has to be tested over time. So if you're fully vaccinated, can you transmit at all? There are some vaccines that do that, where they call it's called sterilization vaccination. That means that you absolutely cannot transmit it because it's wiped out immediately. So that's a piece of information that we don't have. What I do know from the experience at OHSU is that the vast majority of our employees are now vaccinated, and we have had no cases amongst our employees in the last 5 weeks. And I know of no examples of transmission from an employee. So I'd say that's a pretty good indication. We should have information regarding just how effective it is for transmission soon. The point of a vaccination, though, is to knock transmission down to a very low ebb, or perhaps zero. So if we want to look at the numbers and where this is going, Pfizer has had about 40 million vaccinations administered so far, with 120 million to be delivered by the end of March. Moderna, roughly 100 million by the end of March, and J&J, which was just approved, 20 million by the end of March. So if we have 240 million doses either administered or available by the end of March, with the clip going in the average in the country, nearly 80% administration, I would say by the end of April, they ought to be in arms. So that would be roughly 130 million people vaccinated of the 330 million people in the country by the end of April. That's possible. That's possible. Maybe probable, but possible. So there have been 30 million cases positively identified in the US, roughly. And if we select a conservative, I love to go by the 80-20 rule, by the way, 5 times the total number. So that would mean that 5 times 30 is 150 million. We've perhaps had 150 million cases, either symptomatic or asymptomatic. That would mean that we have the potential of over 260 million resistant people, perhaps a herd immunity of approaching 80%. Maybe it will be herd immunity. We don't know that for sure yet, by sometime in May. The projections from the University of Washington is that by the end of May, we should be around 1 death per day in the state of Washington by the end of May. The other thing to look at historically is all pandemics in the last 250 years have ended within 18 to 24 months. We are now in month 15 for the world. Because if you look in the WHO report that was just released here very recently, it's actually a pre-release, they were saying that they think they have found patient 0, which would have dated to 1st December 2019. Next slide, please. So let's look at a hypothetical timeline. This is not in rock solid, but let's also look at some of the downsides of relaxing. So by the 1st of June, the cases will fall to a trickle. Transmission is very low, but probably not 0. We won't have everybody vaccinated, certainly not our young people. By 1st of July 2021, the virus now understand, the virus transmits best at about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Summer tends to be warmer than 50 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's going to transmit less anyway. By the 1st of August, I would suggest that many people are going to stop taking all precautions. We shouldn't completely let up our guard. This thing hasn't disappeared, even if we hit some of these numbers that I'm talking about. So I would suspect that a significant number of people are still going to be unwilling to vaccinate. By the 1st of September, if they're unwilling, we may not actually reach what they call herd immunity, where it cannot transmit and cause illness amongst people. And when winter sets in and the temperatures fall again, it is possible that the virus could re-emerge. So what can we do to prevent that? Vaccination and continuing to take some moderate precautions. What would that be? Mask wear, and be careful of getting together in big spaces for a large group for extended periods of time without taking some modest precautions. Perhaps mask wear and being careful how much you talk. Or make sure that the people that gather are vaccinated. If everybody's vaccinated, the risk is, if not zero, pretty darn close to it. Next slide. So I would like to pass this on to our next speaker. I just wanted to make sure that we had some numbers to look at and think about, and maybe you can prepare your questions.
Yeah, after Dave, Katie, and I have talked and Matt has screen shared that Lent page, you'll be able to ask questions of any of us, and then we'll move on to the conversation.
And as I said at the beginning, if you have any questions you are afraid you're going to forget by the end, you can shoot them in the chat to me and I will have them ready to go towards the end.
All right, so I think it's my turn. Good afternoon. I'm Katie Arkush. I'm the principal over at Sarah J. Anderson Elementary. This is my 6th year at Sarah J. And if you guys have never been there, it's a great place post-COVID to come volunteer. We love having anybody come by. But first, I want to just kind of share a little bit about my COVID experience, just on a personal level, and because I believe it really does kind of influence how we work on a professional level. So during the pandemic, my husband and I got married. We had to have a COVID style wedding, which was mask wearing, hand sanitizing, quarantining 2 weeks before and after, which worked out really well. Nobody got sick. My parents were great, and that was awesome. But later on, my grandmother did contract COVID during at her nursing home, and then gave it to my parents, and then my siblings had it. And we've really had the whole gamut of experiences with COVID. My grandmother was 99 and did pass away after her exposure. My father was hospitalized, but is better. My mom is better. And my siblings just lost their sense of taste over Thanksgiving and Christmas, which might have been, their own penance for maybe not doing as much as they should to be socially distant. I don't know. But to say all that is to say that the planning at the elementary school, middle school, and high school with Vancouver Public Schools has been very extensive. Father Woody mentioned that, Our Lady of Lourdes School has been working in overtime. And I want to say that the people in Vancouver have been doing the same. We have tried to make sure that all precautions when bringing students back really followed the letter and the spirit of the law, making sure that we had mapped out classrooms, created protocols for every possible scenario. And each school is just a little bit different. So for example, if you were to walk into Sarah J, which you can't right now because we don't allow any visitors, it's one of our precautions. But if you were to walk into Sarah J, you would see dots all along the floor. We've created paths for students to walk on. We've created it so they're 6 feet apart. They have the visuals. We have signs everywhere. We've created bathroom schedules, recess schedules, sanitation schedules. Every classroom has Vindicator spray to spray down when they need to. We've created recess schedules for students. So at the elementary school, in my school at Sarah J. Anderson is one of the largest elementary schools in Vancouver Public Schools. Actually, I think it is the largest. We sometimes go back and forth with Walnut Grove, but we always win. So we have a recess schedule. So every single class stays together in a pod. The students go out to recess together. We have a recess schedule where they're only playing with each other. They're assigned different areas and we kind of rotate through so they get different experiences. And then they go back to their classrooms and eat with the same person and that same group of students. And so we really do try to minimize contact as much as possible. Given that, you know, our students, the biggest the biggest worry of everybody when we were coming back to in-person services, well, how do you expect these kids to be able to do this, right? They're 5, they're 7, you know, they can't keep their hands to themselves. And I just want to let you guys know that the kids have been absolutely phenomenal. They're actually way better than the adults. The times I've had to talk to kids versus the times I've talked to adults is way, way different. Our students, they are happy to be in school. They are following the rules. They're doing their best. I mean, sometimes you have a kindergartner who might have his mask below his nose, but you just tell them to pull it up and they remember. They've been absolutely phenomenal. And their teachers and their staff assistants and everybody that is involved in the effort to get kids back in school have been just so flexible and so welcoming for students. It was funny, the anxiety of staff was very high when students were coming back. They were worried, right? There's a lot of unknowns. But as soon as those kids walked through the door, it was almost like our purpose and our reason for being here really just eased. It was actually one of the more grounding experiences to have kids come back. I like to joke, kind of not joke, we had 11 first days of school this year with just the different groups coming back. And with each first day, it was just a little bit better. And the kids made it a little bit more real and more normal. And, you know, for the most part, everybody has done a fantastic job. I know last week we had our 6th graders start at the middle schools. And then this week, our 7th and 8th graders are going to start at the middle schools. And I'm not as familiar with the middle school plans because, you know, I live in my little empire of Sarah J. It's where I have control. But I do have a middle school stepson who would be going to Geyser this year. And the different things that they have in place too, with having kids sit, you know, at lunch, they're sitting on chairs or just eating in their laps. They are transitioning outside the building and just really trying to keep their distance. It's gone well. 6th grade went well. And I know they just announced on March 8th, contingent on numbers of the county, our 9th graders will return to school. And then on March 15th, our 10th through 12th graders will return to school. And I know from experience with my staff and with other community members, those high school students and those middle school students, they really, really want to be back. I've listened to several board meetings. If you guys have a couple spare hours on a Tuesday, the board meetings for Vancouver Public Schools are posted and you can listen live to their Zooms or you can listen to any of their recordings. But the ones that have been the most powerful have been some of those middle school and high school students speaking about their need to be back. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you guys for helping us get those numbers down, that the students need to be there, and with continued masking and social distancing and just being aware of who you're interacting with, they can stay in school because it really is the best scenario for kids. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm happy to take questions back if I don't know the answers, because like I said, I do live in my microcosm of Sarah J. Anderson, but I do know a lot of people that have a lot of answers that I can filter through Father Woody.
Thanks, Katie. I just have a few things to say. You guys are experienced in and familiar with what this has looked like at the parish level. Almost all of our meetings and activities are on computer screens, including this one. We do worship together, but even there, most of our people are experiencing that through their computer screens. We're currently worshiping together in person twice a weekend. Soon, I hope, during the Easter season, we'll be doing that 3 times a weekend. My hope is before too many months have passed that we'll have opened up enough times and space for us to pray together safely without having to bother with that cumbersome and labor-intensive register in an advance system. That should be in our near future. The rules that we operate under keep changing. We get directives from the governor's office, from the health department, and from the Archbishop and his coronavirus task force. It is really complicated to keep up. We will do our best and we'll keep praying. If you look around town, you'll see that a few of our Catholic churches are blessed to have gigantic worship spaces. That's allowed them to do a few more things together in person than we do. Like a few places are even having Friday stations in person. We haven't figured out how to pull that off well yet, but you will see that there are lots and lots of at-home and online Lent things available to you. In a moment, I'm going to ask Matt to walk you through our Lent resource webpage. There's going to be more and more being added to that as we come up with stuff, but there's already plenty. In terms of just a spirituality insight for this whole situation we're living in, I would remind you our Catholic tradition is deep and it's old. Being forced to stay mostly at home and mostly in the company of family or people you're very close to most of the time is nothing new. What we've all been sentenced to basically is to create our own little monasteries. If you joined the Benedictines, for example, you'd be living in the same community with the same 40, 50, 60 guys, and you'd only go out with special permission, and your day would be very structured, and you'd spend the rest of your life doing that. We've only done this for a year. The insight from that I would share with you is that monks have 1,500 years experience figuring out how to manage living like that well. So I would suggest that we steal tips and tricks from our monastic communities for processing and living this out well ourselves. The keys, I have studied the rule of St. Benedict at length. It was kind of the focus of my medieval studies class. The hearts of the rule of St. Benedict that helps them do this well are the principles of balance and of routine. They have fixed hours of prayer. They don't even wear watches, most of these monks, because the bells ring at prayer time, the bells ring at mass time. Everybody in the grounds can hear it, and they get gathered together in church and they do their thing. They have fixed hours for spontaneity. They have fixed hours for gathering as community. They always have their meals together, and they do them in silence with spiritual reading being done for them. I don't recommend that for a family with kids. But the bits and pieces of the monk's way of life can make the COVID way of life in a household much more tolerable, much more balanced, much more healthy. I really recommend the adopting of routines. Make sure there's a balance between your together time and your alone time. If you don't have enough room in your house for everybody to have an alone space, be intentional about making sure everybody has access to alone time for a certain part of the day. If you never before have been insistent about at least some of your meals being mandatory and together, this is the time to do that. When I grew up, 6 p.m. Sunday dinner was an absolute non-negotiable. Everybody was always there, and guests were always welcome. We can't do the guest thing right now, but we can guarantee that together time. In the house where I grew up, the TV was in the formal living room, and we hung out in the den. To watch TV was an all-family event, and it was something we had planned in advance that we wanted to watch. The TV was never a babysitter, and it was never background noise. It was always intentional. Those are the sort of things that will sustain us and keep us going, even when we're all locked up in the same house for the better part of a year and even more. And praying does not require much but an open heart and a little bit of time to do it alone or with others. More will emerge when we have our conversation. But for now, one thing the Rule of Benedict says, and I quote, "The life of a monk ought to be a continuous Lent." In some ways, COVID rules have put a Lent lifestyle on us year round. But because it really is Lent right now, as a parish staff, especially through our web gurus, Matt and Sean, we've put some resources together to help you do some Lent things well, even when we can't gather. And I'd like Matt to share a screen and walk us through some of those before we go into open conversation. Take it away, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you, Father Woody. So if you go to our parish website, which I will do right now for you all, you're on the home page. If you scroll down, and let me know if you can't see this, you have this thing that says Lenten Parish Resources. Click here. So I will follow its instructions and click there. And it'll open up this little page. And it's on a site that Sean and I have been working hard during COVID epidemic and stuff, or the pandemic and stuff, to create. And it's has different faith formation stuff, but this specifically is about Lent. So we have different options for people to do. We have evening prayer, which we have recorded the first Friday of Lent, which was last Friday. The Friday, the second week of Lent is this upcoming Friday. You can listen along as well as pray together using the PDF. And this is in place of what we typically have on Fridays in Lent, a soup supper with evening prayer and Station of the Cross. So we have those up. We have meatless soup recipes for our soup suppers. Mary Hernandez put those together. We have Stations of the Cross, 4 different versions of stations. We have our Marian themed one, which we usually do on Good Friday, but you can access it now at any point. We have another Station of the Cross, a different one, as well as the Boy Scouts that is Stations of the Cross as well. That's up here. Those are the only things on there right now. Sean and I are seconds away from adding more things like family activities we have kind of ready to go on there. Kind of not adult geared reflection, but reflections geared for people who aren't children to read and like have more of a deeper reflection kind of activities based on that. The goal is to have this kind of be a place for people to come if they want to read something, or if Sean and I even find like a good homily from a priest like across town, we'll put it on there, something that you can read and kind of reflect on and listen to.
Yeah, because you won't find it here at home.
But the goal is, again, just to have as many resources on there as possible, because some people love evening prayer, and this is a great way to pray together. Some people love Stations of the Cross. Other people, spiritually, it doesn't necessarily do what they want it to do for them. And so the goal is to have something for everyone on there, including families and stuff like that. And so, again, that's just on our homepage. Just the little banner that says Lenten Resources. Click there, and like I said, within the next few days, there'll be a ton more on there as well from Sean and I.
There'll also be a couple more versions of the stations that are still pending. I know the school kids are going to do their traditional Spanish-English bilingual stations. That'll go up there at some point. And this year, the Feast of St. Joseph landed on a Friday. So instead of one of those Fridays, there'll be the special prayers that go with the feast day. They just haven't been recorded yet.
Exactly, yeah. So check back regularly, because more stuff will be added not daily, but every few days there'll be something new on there for you to use. Whether that's a new version of stations, like Father Woody said, or something else that we'll add as well.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to entertain content questions for our panel of experts, and then we'll open it up to a broader conversation. Okay, I think we're ready to move to the last phase of our conversation. People's tips, tricks, best practices for maintaining your balance, your spiritual, emotional, and physical health during these times. I'll share a little bit myself, then I'd invite all of our panelists to do a little bit, and then we'll open the floor to everybody. I walk a lot, and when the weather cooperates, doing it outside really fills me up. There's something about being exposed to a bunch of trees and whatnot that just is so soul satisfying, and the walking is good for overall health. For prayer, I use the Liturgy of the Hours, 5 set times of prayer during the day, with a mostly Book of Psalms based prayer form that is used around the whole church. If you don't know what that looks like, check the Lent page. Those things that are marked evening prayer, those are a component of the Liturgy of the Hours. and check them out and try them. I pray the Mass with everybody on those rare occasions when we are prevented from having Mass at a regularly scheduled time. I still do it all by myself in the little front room of my house. Quiet, silent, sitting and letting God make me aware of his presence is the personal prayer form that works for me. Everybody is different. There are as many ways of praying as there are people. That's the one that nurtures me. If you don't know what yours is yet, play and try different styles and forms and approaches to prayer until you find something that really feeds your spirit. And be open to the possibility that what feeds you might change as your circumstances or your own maturity develops or regresses, which mine has sometimes. For connection, I spend way too much time on the phone with my brother, sisters, and mom. And I am part of a support group that is currently only meeting over Zoom. And for fun, I have a piano at home, and I love having the little bit of extra time these days to experiment in the kitchen. I could go on, but those are some of the things that are working for me to stay balanced, to stay healthy, and to stay connected. Other panelists?
I would like to add, this is Tim, add to what Father Woody was saying in regards to the liturgy of the hours. Yes, they can be, it's a prayer of the church. And as a couple, we can do, if you were to go to the Mount Angel website, they actually have all their liturgy of the hour prayers. And you watch the monks go back and forth. Well, you can do that back and forth as a couple, and it's praying together. It is spending more, obviously in this COVID time, we are spending more time at home, but that's time we don't have to. You got to look, maybe it's attitudinal. I get to spend more time with Mary versus I have to spend more time here. It's I hesitate. I'm not a Facebook or any other type of social media person, and it has nothing to do with my age. I just think it's way overdone. But it gives us time to talk, or to read something that it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting device. You should see it. It's made out of paper, and there's printed words on it. You can open it up instead of having to look at a screen. I'm being sarcastic, obviously, but it is a book. There are things that can be done that are not necessarily old-fashioned. I noticed one of my granddaughters actually had what they call them, blue tent glasses. Blue screen glasses, because I guess that if you watch this, if you get too, here we're all watching each other on the computer, but if you go too wild with being on that can be, affect your sleep patterns and all
hers
that.
was mostly from schoolwork, I think. So.
Yeah, but anyway, we're spending time together in prayer. Obviously multiple forms of prayer. The liturgy of hours is a great one. Rosary, whatever, spiritual reading, and no matter what our Protestant brothers and sisters think, we as Catholics do read the Bible, and we can get a lot from that too.
And I think I was talking to Tim the other day, mentioning that about 2 months ago, another parishioner who is now in another state, out of the blue, called us in the evening, and we just chatted with her for like an hour, and to me it was very uplifting. So I think being the recipient of a call and also maybe initiating that call to someone would be a good way to help keep you going during this time.
Let's give someone else a shot.
Well, I was gonna add on to what you had said, but this is an app. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this app. It's pretty amazing, and it goes with what Father Woody likes to do too, because I feel like I never have time to sit down. But this app is called Hollow. It has the rosary, it has Lenten challenges, it has meditations, it has all these different things. But I love it because if I take my dog for a walk, which she needs like 17 walks a day because she feels like she's neglected, or if I'm cooking or cleaning or any of those things, it's like such a great app that has like a Bible in a year. It has a lot of Father Schmidt's homilies and different things. But it is such a cool, and it is a screen, but you don't actually have to look at the screen. You're just listening. So you don't have to actually see it. But it's a really cool thing to have when you are trying to multitask a little bit, or trying to be active because you're sitting in front of a computer all the time. But it's been a really great addition to my morning, evening walks with my dog. And honestly, like we put it on when we go to sleep too, because there's an evening meditation that they have on there that's really quite calming. So.
Anything to add, other deacon?
I was just, Tim hit a lot of that, liturgy of the hours and certainly reading scripture. But one of the things I was trying to do, well, two things actually. One is you've got to have some type of exercise routine, I think, whatever it is, walking, jogging, sit up, something, just devote a little bit of time to exercise. I just think that's just necessary. When you kind of get stuck in the house too much, it's just not good if you're not taking care of your physical needs. And I think the other thing that I've been trying to do once a day is I'm trying to do something nice for someone else, whether it's in the household or if I'm outside, holding a door for somebody as they're putting the shopping cart in, whatever it is. I'm trying to say, can I do something nice? It doesn't have to be much, but something nice every day for somebody, and then kind of check that off. So that's kind of the thing that I've been trying to do, not only in the house, but when I'm also just out, even though it's limited, just trying to keep that in mind as we're interacting with other people. So that's what I would add for what that's worth.
I'm about to open this up to everybody, but I want to emphasize again what I said earlier about the TV in my family and still in my life. If we know there is something coming up sometime this week that is worthwhile and that we want to watch, we make an event out of it and we watch TV. We never turn the darn thing on to see if there's anything to watch. That's the beginning of a really bad habit.
Hey, Woody.
Yeah.
So since I'm one of the panelists, I'd like to say that this has kind of perversely been an opportunity to connect with all of you much more than I have done in the past and work together. It's been, as you said, I've given more than 30 talks. Well, why do I do that? It's to calm people down. I answer questions. People call me on the phone, and it's just to give them comfort. And so I think that's helped me stay balanced. Although I can't say that I've really been isolated that much. A lot of what I do requires me to be present. And so I'm present at OHSU, but I'm also present at OLL as much as you tolerate me.
We promised you guys we would only be on for an hour. I'm willing to stay as long as the host is willing to keep the screens open, but it is open floor now for people to just share your best practices or your concerns or whatever it is that's on your mind and heart.